Thank you very much, Peter. And thank you, Tracy, for joining us today. Um, and we're really interested in how you came to be a writer. Could you tell us, first of all, a brief overview of how you got published?
Yeah, sure. It's great to see everyone, by the way. Hello. I used to work with OU students quite a lot in the past when I was at the OU. So, yeah, that's brilliant. I used to be an OU student myself as well. So, it was quite a roller coaster journey, and you'll probably find a lot of writers say this. So, I always wanted to write. And the first book that I wrote was a shapeshifter romance, which sounds really random, but that is the first book I wrote because it was on the wave of like the Twilight, Stephanie Meyer kind of stuff. And I absolutely loved all that kind of thing back then. And I wrote it in a madness and a hurry and got an agent pretty quickly because I think agents were looking for that kind of Stephanie Meyer replacement. And it got a deal in Germany randomly, of all places. So I was, that was really, it was great. I was lucky as a debut author to get published there. But when I was published there, I started to want to write more adult stuff and, came out of the kind of phase of wanting to write that young adult stuff. And I parted ways with my agent because she was very keen on me sticking with the young adult and sticking with that because it was commercially all around the business it was doing so well. So I thought, okay, that's fine. I'll get another agent. But actually, it was so hard to get another agent. I had 70 rejections, and yes, I counted them all. And it was, it's really interesting that when you think you get an agent pretty easily the first time, it wasn't guaranteed the next time. And I actually felt like giving up, and I kind of did give up. And we went away to Exeter, my husband and I just started writing a book which turned out to be my other debut novel, The Atlas of Us. And I wasn't planning on getting that published. I just wanted to write. It's almost like therapy, and just enjoyed writing about something. And in the way that was quite freeing. But then my friends read the draft. They're like, you have to get this published. And that bolstered my confidence again after being quite low. And I thought, what the hell? I'm just going to try one more time. And I sent it out. I got it, made sure it's perfect as it could be. Sent it out to agents and got really quick response from agents. So from getting 70 rejections for another novel I wrote to this novel, I got a really, within days, agents were responding to me. So it goes to prove, how different things can be from novel to novel and time to time. And that she worked with me, I've got a brilliant agent still with her, worked with me on it. And actually, then I got a deal with HarperCollins, but that took quite a few months to get. So I got lots of rejections from lots of big publishers. And then in the end, an editor at HarperCollins happened to read it and just think, actually, I love this. And so it was a real roller coaster ride, but I got there eventually and got a book deal with HarperCollins. So yeah, never give up hope, I guess the message is there.
Excellent, and well done for your tenacity and keeping on. And it's good to know that you had that support group around you to read your work and and encourage you as well, which I think is really important. One of the students posed a question actually before the conference and said, do you think getting published is a matter of luck, or is there anything we can do to make our own luck?
I think a lot of it is making your own luck. I think there's a bit of a misconception, sometimes that it's all about luck and it's all about who you know. I think you have to be, like you said, quite tenacious. I've always taken an almost business-minded approach. I leave the creativity to my writing, but beyond that, you have to be quite business-minded. So I think things like knowing your genre, knowing the market, as tempting as it can be to disappear into your writing world, and you can do that when you're writing, but when it comes to submitting to an agent, you need to know about the genre that you're writing. You need to know what's working, what's selling at the moment, and how to sell that novel to an agent or to a publisher, or if you're self-publishing, how to pitch that novel in that way. So it's, for me, it was definitely, I worked really hard, especially when I pitched to the second agent. I did a lot of research into. I did a research into the book club women's fiction market, and I made sure when I queried her that I actually sort of made sure that it was I was talking about what was selling well and the comparisons. And now when I'm writing stuff, so Venom in the Blood, which is my novel that's coming out in a few weeks, I knew I wanted to write a crime novel. Something quite dark, but there's so much out there and it's a really, really tough market at the moment. So I just thought to myself, look, how am I going to make this different? and I had a look out there, I had a think. I love insects anyway, and I knew to draw in that sort of entomology insect element would make it stand out, hopefully. So I had a very commercial kind of feeling in my mind when I was writing it, but also writing with a passion as well. So I would say 80% is down to luck, but then they're down to working hard at it and, making your own luck. But there is an element of luck as well. So things like something you could suddenly get on the crest of a wave of a trend and not even know it. You could have written something and then suddenly it's really popular. Or there might be a gap in a publisher or agent's list and they're looking for a particular thing, and your book happens to be on their desk at that time. So there can be an element of luck, but I think mainly it's down working really hard and being really knowledgeable about the market.
Thank you. That's a really interesting sort of like view, really, of where creativity and commerciality meets. I'm just curious.
May I ask a question?
Oh,
May I ask a question?
If you want to put your questions in the chat, and then we may come to those at the end. Just one thing that I'm quite curious about is your novel that had been rejected before you wrote the novel that really hit with the agents. Have you ever done anything with that, or is it buried away somewhere?
It's a trunk. I always call these trunked novels as authors. It's those novels that it was kind of a bit of a paranormal kind of novel, so it had a ghostly element in it, and I know it's one of those novels that sits between genres. So I have looked at it again before, but because when you start getting publishing contracts, and you in particular genres, you kind of become very busy, so doing the stuff that you're getting paid for. But talking to you, I think I do need to properly look at it. Occasionally I've looked at it, but it will need a lot of work. So yeah, one day when I have a bit more time, I think I will relook at it.
Yeah, I speak as somebody who has a couple of novels stashed away in drawers somewhere. so I understand that that life moves on, doesn't it? And your creativity moves on.
Yeah, but this also relates to that luck thing as well. It's like, say suddenly a genre is really popular, and this genre that I wrote suddenly became really popular. I might be like, okay, I've got this here. Let's spend a few weeks revising it and see what we could do with it. Yeah.
So nothing ever goes to waste, really. No. What about life as a writer? Are there any challenges that you come across when writing for a living?
So yeah, as I mentioned earlier, I used to work at the OU, and when I started making money with my novels, which took a while, but so I knew I had to sort of make it a full-time thing, so I just wouldn't have been able to fit it in, and it was the dream. And we all dream about being full-time authors. Well, I say all, some people don't, but you love the idea of doing what you love all day long. And it has been wonderful, and I've been so blessed and lucky, but there have been challenges, certainly over the past couple of years. It's the security, the money, because it's a very unpredictable market. It's difficult to guarantee that you'll be making a particular amount of money every month, and a bit of complacency as well. So on the complacency side, it's if you're sat all day writing, you're not necessarily going to get out there and get that kind of experience. So when you're in an office, or if you're doing your job, you're kind of noticing little things and picking up on quirks and conversations. So that can be really useful. And so recently I've actually got a part-time job, because a mixture of needing to have that security. The market the economy is a nightmare at the moment, as we all know. And I just knew in 6 months' time, if my next set of books didn't sell decently, I'd have to start thinking about that. But also it's just for talking to people during the day and learning about something new. And that's really inspired me and really made me a lot more. I've been working a lot harder in a way. It's made me a lot more on it. So yeah, definitely those two challenges, is insecure, and you can get a bit complacent, but it's still wonderful. It's still wonderful doing it every day, or having a day a week dedicated to it is great.
Brilliant. And you mentioned there, about when you were working at the OU and being in the office, you hear people's conversations. It's not quite the same solitude as being a writer locked in your office. It's good to get out there and get inspiration. How do you find inspiration for your novels now?
And I tend to find it in nature, which sounds a bit cheesy, but yeah, I love getting out. And I tend to come up with ideas when I'm walking or when I'm seeing things. So with No Turning Back, one of my novels, I was walking, pushing my child along in her pram, and a man walked past, and he was probably a really lovely guy, but he looked a bit dodgy. But he was probably absolutely the loveliest guy, who knows? But in my mind, I suddenly imagined, what if he tried to attack my daughter? What would I do? I know that sounds, is that what if? And that spiraled into an idea, and I started writing a novel around it, because I think what if ideas are really strong if you've got a what if at the center of your novel. And then with Venom in the Blood, I knew I wanted to write the crime, and I knew I wanted to write something about insects, but being out in nature and watching these insects helped me come up with this character and how you would feel as someone who's fascinated with insects. So I do think getting out there and being inspired can be great, because just walking, for some reason, it creates this momentum of creativity.
Yeah,
so I'd recommend that. But that's definitely, and I've always had a crazy imagination. My daughter's inherited it. It's just coming up with lots of random ideas. You could even be watching the news, especially at the moment, watching the news, and you're just like, something spirals. So I would write everything down, and lots of what ifs and lots of ideas, because even if at that time it feels a bit lame, later on, a week later, you might be, actually, that idea is amazing, I'm going to write it.
Brilliant. And when you've got a novel that's ready to come out for publication, how much of your, I suppose, your working day then becomes about promotion, and how much of it is writing? Is there a balance, or do you put the writing to one side, or do you still continue keeping your hand in some way?
It's annoying me at the moment, actually, because I've got Venom in the Blood coming out in 3 weeks, and I'm trying to do stuff on social media, but I'm also writing the 3rd book in the series, and I'm doing edits on book 2, and I've now got this part-time job. So it's actually lovely doing this, because I can just sit and talk and not have to think about all that necessarily. It's wonderful. But yeah, you do have to balance it. If you've got a publisher, they do a lot of stuff. To be honest, my publisher are doing a lot, but as an author, only you can connect with the readers, so you still have to do stuff on social media, or you feel like you have to. So I kind of do try to balance it. I tend to do a lot of the promotional stuff at the weekend, so on my phone or something, and trying to do social media stuff. But it's really important to, like, during the week, in that working week when I am working on writing, I try to do my writing and my editing. So annoyingly, the sort of marketing stuff does happen at the weekends on my mobile phone, but I probably should dedicate more, but it is important. And if you're self-published, it's even more that you have to do the admin and marketing side of things. So you really have to know how to balance that. Something author friends of mine have done is have days dedicated to particular things. So saying, okay, Monday, Tuesday, even if you're working, it's in the evening, you're doing your writing. Then Wednesday, you do your promotion, that kind of thing, and pre-schedule stuff.
Yeah.
But it's tough. It is tough.
So you mentioned writing series there, and I know that quite a lot of your books are in series. I'm intrigued about emplotment with that. Do you know that you're going to write a series when you write the first book in a series, and how far ahead do you plot?
Oh, that's quite a good question. I think so I have a Forest Grove series, which is like the psychological suspense, and I knew all the books would be based in a forest setting. It was all about the setting, but all the characters are quite different, so they weren't necessarily stories that continued over the series. But I was aware of the different stories that would come up. With Venom in the Blood, I definitely knew what was going to happen into book 2, but now I'm writing book 3, and book 3 is difficult I'm trying to figure out what's going to happen if I do continue it into book 4 and 5. So there's that creativity and commercial side again, because I'm not going to write more books in this series if it doesn't sell enough, because I cannot afford to do that. I may do eventually, but it has to sell it has to sell in order for a publisher to say to me, I'd love to, if I'm really passionate about the series, but I have to be careful not to write stuff that's not going to make me money at the moment, if half my income is from that. So I have planned it, but I haven't gone over the top about it. But I know some people are really methodological and they'll know exactly what's going to happen right until book 10. But I haven't done that yet.
Yeah. John's actually asked, and I'm looking at the questions that have come up, whether you would focus on characters and then build a story world around them, or have an idea for a story and then imagine characters that can tell it.
It's a combination, actually. So I would say with the Venom in the Blood series, it was very much Dr. Vanessa Marwood. She's a forensic entomologist, and she very clearly came to my mind. So even though I knew crime, insects, it's like then this character burst into life. I didn't know the plot, and she's this gothabilly kind of, character, and it's a lot of the plot has really spiraled from that. So I've definitely did it with that. With my debut novel, Claire, the main character, was based a bit on me, so it's my struggles of infertility when I was struggling with that and various other things. So that was a very character focused. But then I've also had very plot focused. So there's no strict hard and fast rules. It's just how they come to you. And I think you can do it either way. I think it shows if you've got a really strong, if you've got a character and you started with that, your characters are much, I feel they tend to be a lot stronger. But sometimes the plot can be, not as strong. So you just got to get a good balance.
Yeah, I suppose it's quite intuitive, isn't it? Really.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a few similar questions actually, and to know that there was one of the questions that was asked before about what do you do? I mean, I'm writing a thesis at the moment, so I understand this. What do you do when you're staring at a blank page and don't know where to begin? Or James has said, or maybe when you're not in the mood, how do you get started?
I think, well, there's kind of two contradictory pieces of advice, but first of all, I just get away from the desk and I go out for a walk, or I watch a film, I read a book, listen to some music, because when you do stuff like that, it can build up inspiration. And so I'd always recommend don't force yourself to stare at a blank page. Go out and get some inspiration. But at the same time, one of the biggest issues, and this sort of relates to advice, is like, if you don't write your book, if you don't finish it, you're never going to get published. So you really do have to finish it. So sometimes you do have to force yourself to sort of sit there and do it. Sometimes the book's not meant to be written. If you're finding it's days in a row that you're really not feeling it, maybe you need to think about another idea. But then you can get into a habit of keep coming up with different ideas. But if an idea catches fire and you love it, you are going to be drawn to write it. But definitely on those days when you don't want to, and I have them, even with books that I'm so passionate about, I just go and watch a film, watch a series, watch Bridgerton, and go out, do something to inspire me, and get some ideas.
Yeah, excellent. I suppose from a discipline point of view, I mean, how much when you're writing a novel, do you write by time, or do you have like a word count that you try to achieve each day?
Yeah, so I try to reach a word count. So especially if I'm writing, to deadline, so I'll figure out how many words need to be written and then how many words a day. And usually that's about 2,000 to 3,000, sometimes more. And because I know I have to do it, I've got deadlines, and it's just better to. It motivates me to do that. But sometimes I also realise some scenes take longer than others, so I do give myself a little bit of slack. But yeah, it's that I do definitely try and aim to do word count rather than time, because then I feel like I can't get away with being lazy. So if I haven't reached I like to have a nap. If I haven't reached my 2,000 words by the time I've had a nap, I then have to carry on afterwards as well, and really make sure I finish that and nail it.
Yeah. And in terms of those deadlines, are they self-imposed deadlines, or are they deadlines from your agent or deadlines from your publisher?
So when you get a publishing deal, you will get in your contract a deadline for when the first draft needs to be handed in. Obviously, the first draft they see isn't going to be your first draft. So I tend to set myself little deadlines. So write the first draft by a certain time, give myself a break from it, because I think that's important. Give yourself a break from that draft. and then come back to it 2 weeks later and read it through and revise it. So I'm quite strict. I have little deadlines that I set for myself for each stage.
And then you've mentioned there that you've edited it and drafted it ready to give to the agent and the publisher. What about how often do the publishers sort of like ask for rewrites or further editing?
Always. They always do. It's really rare you don't get asked. And you, as a writer, if you want, even if when you're self-published as well, you have to accept it's got to go through a number of rounds, and have other eyes on it. And I love that process. Weirdly, some people love writing the first draft and they hate the editing, but I love the editing. I always say that my first drafts, even when I go through them and check them, they are I call them toxic. They're just like, you don't want to leave them in a room anywhere. They're really bad. But I love having something to work with, and then you just sort of add to it. My first drafts are usually really short, and then I add layers on top of it according to what my editor and I talk about. So I think, they're always rewritten. I tend to I'll get editorial notes back. The longest I've had is 20 pages long. And some people might hate the sound of that, but I think it's great because someone's talking about your book. It's like, oh, this is really great. And they're like, I love this character, but you need to do this and this, and I'm open to that. And I won't do everything they say, but I just think it gives you another perspective, and it's really important.
Yeah. And I suppose I understand that really, somebody's really engaged. They've read it, they've understood it. They've engaged with your work. Do you ever have moments where you disagree with the editor, and how do you kind of resolve those conflicts or disagreements?
It's really, I just say I don't agree with you. I think it's really important I have this saying, I run a writers group, and I say, don't be a grateful sap. Don't think that you have to do all of their bidding. You are the talent, if that makes sense. They're talented as well as an editor, but you are the one pouring your heart and soul into it. And if your instincts don't agree with something they're saying, think about it. That's fine. Take it into account. Think, oh, maybe I'd change. But just push back, and a good editor would be fine with that. They should be fine with it. And editors are very, good, and that includes editors. If you're self-publishing, you've got a freelance editor. You can push back on stuff, not because you're being, oh, this is my writing, and being precious about it. Just being practically, your instincts are telling you, and they're fine. Most of the time they get it right, to be honest. But other times if it's a track change, I'll just be like, I don't agree, but thanks.
Yeah.
It's good to own yourself, sort of thing.
Excellent. We've got a really interesting question actually in the chat here, and just thinking about the kind of world that we live in, and the way that things, once they're out there, are out there forever. Have you ever come across ethical problems, such as drawing very closely on someone else's experience, or writing about a people group you know little about, and how do you address these in your writing?
So when you say people group, do you mean like a type of sensitivity reading? Is that what you mean?
Yes, a sensitivity reading.
Yeah. So the publishers do have sensitivity readers now, so they will check specifically if what you're writing is sensitive, that they will be checking for stuff like that. I'm just trying to think. So with the Atlas of Us, I wrote about the tsunami, the 2004 tsunami, and I actually got an email saying, you have not written this sensitively, you're not thinking about the victims, but it was like hard. I'm not going to cover thousands. I had to hone in on these characters, so I am aware of it as I'm writing stuff. I am aware, but at the same time, I don't want it to stifle what I'm writing. So. Yeah. And I have written about countries I haven't visited, about people I don't, but I've done my research, and I've written about stuff I do know about, like I've got a Sri Lankan heritage. I've done my research, and I feel that the imagination of an author is wonderful, and you can, but you do have to be in this world. You have to be careful when you're putting yourself out there, and you have to have thick skin. So if you do get something a little bit wrong and a couple of readers are angry at you about it, it's a couple of readers, it's just be have a thick skin about it and be aware of that.
Courage, yeah. So there's a question here about your reading, and we've had a previous question as well. But in terms of your reading, you mentioned that you have an awareness of the genre and what's happening at the moment, in order to make your work commercial. But how much do you still read other books? Do you have time for reading?
So yeah, it is hard when you're looking at words all day. It can be difficult. But I have recently, my friend set up a Bookie Wookie book club. That's what we've called it, the Bookie Wookie book club, to try and encourage us to read more. So we read at least one book a month in different genres, and we're meeting once a month to make sure that we're reading stuff. I do, it is important to read, and I think it's hard during times of. I'm quite a current affairs person as well, so it can be tempting before bed to look at my phone and see what's going on, what Rishi's done, what the latest is, or what Kier's done. So it's kind of like, but I need to make myself read, and as an author I think it's important. But so I do read. I read, and also knowing your genre, so reading your genre, and I do love a bit. I actually love a bit of dystopian stuff, and I would like to write that one day. But yeah, I like to read lots of different things. But also watching things is important, I think. So it's stories, whatever manner that comes in. So watching films, series, reading poetry. I love a bit of poetry, so it doesn't just have to be novels. It's just opening your mind a little bit to lots of different things.
Yeah. So, but yeah, storytelling. I suppose is the important thing, isn't it? So we've got a very technical question here. Do you use notebooks, or do you use your computer, or your mobile phone? How do you write?
So I've got millions. I'm just trying to find. Oh, there's one little notepad. That's what I wrote. So I do like to, if I'm sitting in the garden in nature, I like to write notes, because I think it's good to get away from the computer screen and just free write, and but I've also got notes on my phone, and I use that quite a lot, to be honest. So when I'm sat there, something it's you've always got your phone with you, so I use the notes function, and that's connected to my computer. So it's a real combination of stuff. And on the technical side, I use Scrivener. I don't know if any of you guys have heard of it. It's a really great tool for writing, because it allows you to move scenes around. So, if you think actually that scene is better there, and that's the same with notes, you can put notes in it, and and draw those in and use those for reference. So it's a real combination. But I love sitting in the garden with a notebook. There's just nothing that beats it, and a glass of wine. Then the ideas get really crazy then.
Somebody here's asked, actually, I think we might call this the inner editor, and they've said that they edit their work as they write. Do you do that, or do you just tend to kind of let it all out and then invite your inner editor back in?
So yeah, I do. I prefer to. I mean, I plan stuff now. So I never used. I used to be a pantser, as they're known. But when I had my daughter, I had to be a lot more organised, and I plan my novels. But then from the plan, I'll write the first draft in Scrivener, scene by scene, and I try not to edit, because I feel like on one day I might edit something that on another day I wouldn't. Whereas when it's all together, it's much better. So I put it all together in one draft. I then read it through when it's all together, because I already know what things I've changed about, and what what's happened before and what happened in the future. So I prefer to do it like that. But you've got to find your own ways. If you like editing as you go along, I think that's fine. It just might delay you a little bit from finishing it.
Yeah. Somebody's asked about your writing groups, and how do you find your folk? Do you have a writing community that you engage with?
Yeah, so actually when I did start writing fiction with the OU, so I met some people on that, and I think courses are brilliant for that kind of thing, and connecting with the people that you're learning with, and making writer friends that way, even if you're not discussing the intricacies of your book, to be able to moan about the writing and writer's block is really useful. Now I run a group specifically for published authors. There's loads of groups out there for aspiring authors related to these courses and so on, but this book is for people who've been published or just about to be published. They've got a book deal, and that can be indie or it can be traditionally published, and that's really useful because there's a roller coaster ride before you get published. When you get published, it gets even crazier, the ups and downs. So it's really nice to be able to help talk to people about that, because it's quite a solitary thing, isn't it, writing? Yeah. So I think it's really nice to have a community and get involved with a community. And if ever of you get published, it's called the Savvy Writers Snug. So look it up. We do let indie authors in as well. If you're an established indie author, you've got a couple of books under your belt. So yeah, just look that up, because I think it gets even crazier when you get published in a wonderful way.
Brilliant, thank you. I'm just going to ask you one last question because we're so close to time. But is there any advice that you've been given that has really stuck with you?
Meg Rosoff. She's a great author. Some of you may know her. I went to a talk with her. She's great. If you see her talking, make sure you go. And she said, just write the beep beep. You can book. So if you just swear, she said, I'm beeping those out. Just write the book, and you will never get published if you don't finish it. And I know that seems obvious, but I think we get so much in our heads of making everything perfect, but actually if you can just get that draft down, then you've got the best chance. I know so many wonderful, talented people who've written half a book. So there, get it written. Yeah, don't get it right, get it written. Great advice there. Yeah,
brilliant. Tracy, thanks so much. I'll hand back over to Peter now, and thank you so much for all of your generous advice that you've given us.
Okay. Well, thank you. It's been wonderful. Thank you so much. Thanks.
Thank you both. Can I also say thank you to our delegates for being here today and for your brilliant questions along the way. So thank you all very much. And I wish you all a very good rest of conference. We've got some really lovely sessions coming up. So do stick around for those. Lastly, I'd like to say thank you to Antonia for taking time out today. As an OU student, wish you all the very best for your PhD. So thank you, Antonia. Tracy, I put the link to your website in the chat so folk can pre-order Venom in the Blood when it comes out. Is it in 2 weeks?
Yeah, 2 or 3 weeks. Oh my God, I'm losing my mind.
So people can pre-order that. So do I encourage everyone to have a look at that. Thank you all very much, and enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, guys. Lovely seeing you. Thank you. Take care. Bye.